Hey everyone, how you doing? I'm glad to see you're all still here. So, just want to talk briefly about how my last couple of videos have been very informative, which is not usually, the kind of videos that I like to do. I like to do a lot more hands-on, um, you know, videos that help you understand more about hunting rather than the abstract stuff that's, really out there. But I feel like that's important because you need to know why you're hunting and you need to know why hunters do what they do for various reasons that I can talk about for ages. But, so, be happy to know that this video is gladly about hunting, yay, which is good because I haven't made one in a pretty long time. Um, so, um, what does it say? So basically, this video I want to focus, because there seems to be a lot of confusion about what exactly it is that I hunt. People know what hunting means, what I have to do, but what do I hunt? And so I've kind of broken it down into, what is this, 6 real categories, and I'm just going to go through each one of them with you, um, just to help you understand better. So, right, the first category here is, and just really quickly, these are things that for those of you who just hopped on the Redtherhunter train, um, as a hunter, these are things that I deal with, get rid of, um, investigate, try to stop from interacting with our world because I'm not supposed to be here anyway, or me acting as border patrol. It's a really complicated thing. So basically, these are things that I hunt to get rid of. Okay? So, first one, and the most common one that I deal with the most often, is the Unquiet Dead. What some people call shades, or geists, ghosts, specters, shadows, um, wights. There's a bunch of different ones. That's W-I-G-H-T, if you want to look really cool in front of your friends. So, to kind of open up this category, um, the dead does not necessarily mean a ghost, although that is the word that I will use for all of these things. um, Even though it's not technically speaking correct. Um, but hey, what you gonna do? So what I mean when I say the dead is any remains of a human being or once living being that are bound to this earth and remain active. And I'll talk about why that's a bad thing in a minute, but let me just kind of help you out here on what exactly that means. So, as I said in a previous video, you have many different parts to you as a human being. Um, so you have your soul, your spirit, your consciousness, your um, subconscious, spark, body, all these things, okay? And in order to understand how life and death works, you really have to understand that all those things are separate entities that are connected, almost like a group of individuals working towards a common goal. Now that group of individuals is the thing that makes you. So my body is an individual in itself, even though it is technically inert. Kind of like, to call it an individual is really not a good example, but just to say that it is a distinct thing. Um, right. So when you die, it is a necessary part of the transformation from this life to the next to have various things stop. One of these is the physical body that you are occupying. So when I die, my body is going to cease its function and I will be separated from it. And my consciousness, my subconsciousness, a lot of things will also get separated in that process. Okay? Um, Now, some of these things will move on. Some of these things go into other people, into other things. Most of these things will recombine at your destination, and you will be mostly whole again. And not in like a breaking you apart and sticking you back together kind of way, but kind of like a uniting you. It's kind of complicated. Just bear with me here. All right. So in the case of a ghost, most people will say that it is an earthbound spirit or an earthbound soul, which for the most part is generally true. It is the soul itself has bound itself to something on this world, whether that be a person or an object, um, just about anything. And that's based on how the soul works, which I cannot tell you a whole lot about. All I know is that what these things are called anchors. And I've talked about this before, but so let's just say that this necklace was my anchor. It has to be something that has great emotional or spiritual, even religious significance to that person in their life. So I am so attached to this thing that when I die, my soul remains attached to it in almost a leech-like way. Like I need to stick myself onto this thing to remain on this plane of existence. And it usually comes from an innate fear of death, but that's not always the case. Anyway, so these anchors, um, if they are destroyed ritualistically, usually that forces the ghost to move on. But it's also important to understand the psychology of the dead. And there are actually, I think, necropsychiatrists, I think that's the proper term, which study death and the effect that it has on the mind, not as a biological interface, but as a, like, mental interface, obviously. So it's very, very strange, and it's kind of in-depth, but basically it's all about, pretty much there's this principle to the whole thing. Death is a psychological event that is, like, really, really important, at least as we exist now. So when you die, you'll break apart, all these things break apart, and if everything doesn't work the way it's supposed to, very bad things can happen. And in the psychology of the deceased, if the mind does not do things the way it's supposed to do, it'll fracture, and if the soul remains bound, like to an object or whatever, or to this plane, it is technically speaking psychotic, or at least, yeah, pretty much psychotic. Now, that does not mean that it's dangerous innately, but it's not healthy, and it is, well, it is pretty much dangerous to the, not only the world around it, but to the people around it. Things that are not supposed to be often lead to corruption and destruction. So if there is a ghost sticking around someplace, it's often going to fall apart a heck of a lot faster than if there wasn't. And ghosts turn around all the time. Now these are, of course, human souls and human psyches bound to an area. This is not necessarily a residual haunting, which I will talk about very shortly. But so these things are, they're like, they are not necessarily, they don't have the higher mental function required to pass on at this point. This is why I come in these situations, because I either have to ritualistically release them by destroying the anchor, or I can do an abjuration where myself, and I'm not very good at them, so I often get like a mystic to work on it, will contact a death spirit to capture this soul and drag it to where it's supposed to go, which doesn't sound nice, and it isn't nice, and personally I hate having to do it, but it's something that happens, and yeah, it's my calling. So this is separate from another type of dead that I deal with, which are residual hauntings. Now, residual is really not the proper term, and I hate it when people say it because it's like it's not really residual because it is a piece of the person. It's just not their soul, which seems to be what everybody's so concerned about, but it's really not the only piece of you. So a residual haunting is when the spirit or the life force, the essence, um, kind of like the general energy of a person, is bound to an area while everything else has moved on. So it's just really like the id of the person, psychologically speaking, um, kind of like a clone of you almost, that is remaining in an area doing something that happened around the time of your death, around the time of their death, um, over and over and over again in a loop. This is a complex thing because they don't have a complete psyche. They only have a piece of it, and it's a not really functioning piece at that. So it's really difficult to deal with those things. Usually they're not too dangerous just because they don't really realize what's going on yet. Um, but in order to deal with them, it's a very similar thing with ritual. But they're not usually bound to anything aside from a location. It's really difficult to deal with them, but um, they can be harmed just like any normal intangible being with magically charged items or cold iron, things like that. Um, and in a normal, well, not really normal, in a more normal, more classically thought of ghost, you are dealing with a being that is like mental, spiritual, um, and a soul. So it has most of the things that make up a human being, and it has a spirit in it. That's why those things can also be hurt with mystical items or cold iron. Okay? So next video I'm going to talk about the Wicked, which I'm sure is going to make a lot of controversy. Alright, see you guys there. Happy hunting.